Hello everyone and welcome to Plot Twists. So today I'm going to be doing my March wrap-up. I have 9 books to talk about, but we will start with some book stats. So over the course of this month, or last month at this point, I managed to read 3,446 pages, which averages out to 111 pages a day, which is still within my reading goal. So that's 3 consecutive months that I've made that, which is super exciting. In terms of the books I managed to read, I actually managed to read 1 nonfiction book this month, which is pretty exciting because I pretty much never read nonfiction. I read 5 fantasy novels, 3 general fiction novels, and 1 sci-fi novel. I read 6 adult books and 3 YA books. I read 2 books last month that were own voices, which is super exciting. Those 2 books were both written and featured a POC main character, which is super exciting. In terms of my ratings, I had 3 4-star books, 1 4.5-star book, and 5 5-star books. This was an exceptional reading month for me in terms of what I ended up picking up. Most of which came from my TBR, but a couple of the audiobooks I read did not. I like to leave that to be my mood rating for the month, and that tends to work out pretty well. So, without further ado, we'll go ahead and get started. I'm going to go over them in the order that I read them. So the first book that I read last month was An Absolutely Remarkable Thing by Hank Green. This book takes place in the United States and follows a main character who one day is out on a walk in New York City, and she and her friend come across this weird statue that they've never seen before. So she takes a video with it and they edit it and put it on the internet, and this video goes viral because these statues have showed up in every major city in the world. So this book really centers around figuring out where these statues called the Carls came from, what they mean, what they exist for, and answering the even bigger question, is this related to aliens? This is the first book in a duology, and I will be picking up the second one. I really enjoyed this story. Our main character of April has a lot. She's a very snarky kind of character, and it was fun to read her perspective because she was quite funny throughout the story. But she definitely does some things that are frustrating to read from her perspective for. But the story itself, in terms of the sci-fi elements, were excellent. In my opinion, for this to be a good sci-fi story, I need you to explain the science behind it. That's, in my mind, what makes the difference between a sci-fi book and a fantasy book. I know a lot of people like to separate them based on setting, but for me, it's really about how well you explained your science behind everything. And there's a lot of books that talk about, you know, the materials that the statues called Carls are made from, and the science behind why this couldn't logically have originated on Earth, or why they think it couldn't. I don't know. I just really enjoyed this, and I can't wait to pick up the next book. I rated this 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read this month was an audiobook, and that was The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. BookTube has been blowing up about this book, and I now 100% understand the hype. This book was excellent. The story centers in the Midnight Library with our main character, who is Nora. At the start of the story, Nora attempts suicide and ends up in the Midnight Library. And the Midnight Library shows her all of the possibilities of what her life could have been if any choice she had made had been different. The way this book explains this and kind of makes her interested in going to the different worlds is it starts by giving her a list of regrets she had from her life. And it is a whole novel in and of itself. I mean, the number of things where she's like, if I had just not done this or not done this or not done this, it's just so many different things. And as the story progresses and Nora works through each of these different, different possibilities, her perspective changes. I loved where this book started, and I loved where this book ended up. I thought its portrayal of mental health as a mental health professional was really good. I thought the message it was trying to send was exceptional. And honestly, for a book that starts with the main character attempting suicide, for the most part, it was a pretty uplifting story. The beginning part of it, in terms of how depressing it is, was difficult to read. But once you get probably maybe 15% of the way through the book, the rest of it was uplifting. I don't know, I really enjoyed it. I rated this book 5 stars. If you haven't read this, I seriously, seriously recommend this. I think this is a very accessible book for pretty much anybody to pick up and read because of the content. Yes, pick up The Midnight Library. The next book that I picked up this month is The City We Became by N.K. Jemisin. This is a sci-fi novel that takes place in New York City. It follows multiple POVs, and the basic concept is that there are 6 souls to New York City, and the story is basically about how different people interact with it, what that really means, the whole intricacies. From my understanding, this is the beginning to a series, and for the most part, I really enjoyed this. I am definitely going to be picking up more by N.K. Jemisin. Her writing style is exceptional. I loved the way she wrote characters. They were very interesting, diverse, unique, and they had a lot of character development, which I really enjoyed. So I will definitely be picking up more of her stuff. Overall, I rated this 4 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read last month was Mistborn, The Final Empire by Brandon Sanderson. I did do an entire review of that, which I will link in the cards above. But this book is just so good. I wasn't sure that I was really feeling Brandon Sanderson's writing until I read Mistborn, and now I am on the train wholeheartedly. I completely understand why people rave about his stuff. I am part of the way, actually about halfway through the next book in this series, and it is just continuing to be exceptional. I rated this 5 stars. I loved it. If you are interested in starting some Brandon Sanderson, I would say that this is a great place to start with the first Mistborn book. So, yeah. The next book that I picked up last month was Anxious People by Fredrik Backman. This is an adult contemporary novel that I listened to via audiobook. And I really was unsure how I was feeling at the beginning of this. This story basically centers around a bank robber who, after they rob the bank, escapes and holds an apartment showing hostage. So the people that are there to view this apartment to potentially buy it. And at first, there's a lot of information that the book gives you where you're like, this seems extraneous. Why is this even here? The characters are really interesting, and it definitely deep dives into the character. There's not really a whole lot of introduction. It's just like they are what they are. Most of the characters are introduced through police interviews, which is also pretty interesting. But by the time I got to the end of the story and saw how interconnected everything is, nothing in that story is extraneous or unnecessary. All of the characters are so interconnected, it was mind-boggling. This book had to have had so much planning to make all of this work, it kind of blew my mind. I will be picking up more by Fredrik Backman because I really enjoyed this. And there's also a kind of mental health aspect to this as well that I also thought was really well done. I don't know. By the end of the story, I was just in love with each of these characters, watching them develop, progressing some of their backstories, particularly between the main two police officers, which are a father-son pairing. So well done, so exceptional, loved their backstory, loved watching their development. I don't know, I loved this book. I would definitely recommend it. I rated this 5 out of 5 stars. The next book that I read last month was White Fragility by DiAngelo. And I'm not going to go too far in depth with this because I am planning a separate video to talk about that and a different book that I read this month along the same topic. But White Fragility basically talks a lot about the institutional racism that's taking place in this country right now and how different typical white responses can be really harmful to the situation. I loved the way it was written. It was very concise, to the point. I think pretty much anybody who is even like 0.5% open to learning about the situation in this country with racism would really appreciate and get something out of this. If you're closed-minded going into it, well, you're probably not going to get much out of it, but you're definitely who this book is aimed for. Anyway, like I said, I'll talk more about this later, but I adored it. I rated it 5 out of 5 stars. The next two books I have to talk about are part of the Disney Twisted Tales series. The first is Conceal, Don't Feel by Jen Calonita, and this story centers around the concept, what if Anna and Elsa never knew each other? What's really interesting about this particular retelling is that it uses a lot of the major plot points in the movie, and those don't change. But because of the characters' backstories and the fact that Anna and Elsa don't know each other, the way they get to those plot points is vastly different. For the most part, I really enjoyed this book. There were a couple things that I thought could have been done a little differently. I thought it felt too much like the original story without enough change. But overall, I thought the characters were written to what I would expect from the movie. Like I said, it was really interesting that a lot of the plot points still lined up, even though their backstories and the ways they got there were very different. Overall, I enjoyed it. Would definitely recommend this one. I rated this 4 out of 5 stars. The next Disney Twisted Tales story that I read last month was Straight On Till Morning by Liz Braswell. The concept behind this is, what if Wendy first traveled to Neverland with Captain Hook? So without giving too many spoilers away, this story actually centers a 16-year-old Wendy, which is a really refreshing, different take from the original Peter Pan movie. And as such, at the start of this book, Wendy has had Peter Pan's shadow for 4 years. And that's kind of where this story takes off from. Some things that I really appreciated about this book in terms of a Twisted Tales story. Tinkerbell does reference Pixie Hollow more than once, which obviously by this point is canon, and I really loved every mention of that. Because when Pixie Hollow came out, it felt very disjointed from who I know Tinkerbell to be as a character. Seeing this worked into this book and the way it does makes me feel like that version of Tinkerbell and Peter Pan's version of Tinkerbell can coexist in a very, very easy way. And I loved that. The other thing I really appreciated is there is a very significant bond that happens between Tinkerbell and Wendy, and their connection kind of drives this story. Peter Pan isn't even in the story for the first 3/4 of this book, I would say. And I am here for it. Their relationship was exceptional. The girl power in this story was lovely. Their perspectives of Neverland from an older character were also really exciting. Overall, I loved this retelling. This might be one of my favorite Twisted Tales I've read so far. I rated this 5 out of 5 stars. And the last book that I picked up this month was definitely my favorite so far. Well, my favorite for the month of March at least. And that was Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. 100% I feel the hype for this book. Okay. This book centers around our main character, Bree, who is part of an early college program at one of the North Carolina colleges. And she has just experienced the loss of her mother, which definitely plays into the story, and kind of gets swept up in this Arthurian-based society that exists on campus, because she can experience things and see things that she's not supposed to be able to outside of their society. There is a lot. Overall, I really enjoyed this story. There's a lot of institutionalized racism and some overt racism that's also discussed in this book. And I think my favorite part of this from Bree's perspective is that you get to see her inner monologue. There's one point in the story, without, giving you any spoilers, where somebody refers to the room that they're in as being the most diverse that this group has ever had. And she's like, it's me and a bunch of white people. You could, anyway, I loved reading from her perspective. I loved reading her thoughts. That definitely made part of this book for me. But the magic, the fantasy, the Arthurian legend, it's extremely well done. There are some big plot twists in the end I didn't see coming at all, and I need more of this. I need there to be more of the series, and I'm glad there's going to be. I will definitely be picking up the sequel as soon as it comes out. I rated this 6 out of 5 stars, if I could. Definitely my favorite book of March. And that is the 9 books that I read over the course of last month. Please leave me a comment down below and let me know what your favorite book was that you read during the month of March. I hope you guys liked this video. I try to post twice a week, once between Monday and Wednesday and once over the weekend. If you guys enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe, and I will see you guys again soon. Bye!